Greetings and salutations, this is Imperator Vespasian and his trusty sidekick.
Hello!
We're going to be taking a look today at the Polish cavalry, who I have received very recently and painted up, and they're awesome.
And his favourite unit.
Yeah, they're my favourite unit.
Seriously, it's his favourite unit.
Yeah, they're awesome. Cavalry in bolt action are interesting. Cavalry were used in the Second World War. We have discussed this in other videos. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. The Polish army had a considerable amount of cavalry, basically because they really enjoyed the last war and thought that's how you win the next war. Cavalry were very important to the Polish army because they were able to get behind the Russians and destroy them. They cut off the Russians from their lines of supply, starve them of ammunition and food, and destroy them in the field.
WW1.
Yeah, and they tried to do the Russians tried to get out, and the Polish cavalry were used to just run them down. Very useful tool. Also, it enables you to get troops across really rough terrain that tanks and armoured cars might not be able to get across. You can get across that terrain and then deploy infantry from the horses. Basically, the troops get off the horses to fight. So they're really dragoons rather than cavalry. But yeah, that's what they did. They were very useful troops. The figures come equipped with lancers. You may notice on these figures that I have slightly altered them. In the box you get a collection of small metal rods, little brass spears, lancers for the cavalry. What I did, I found that they didn't really fit in the hands very well because the hands are quite large and the brass lancers are actually quite small. So I decided to do a little bit of messing around and I put Dark Age spears on them instead. And that's what I used as lancers. I just thought it looked a lot cooler. So that's what we've got in this little collection of troops. This is a nice depiction of the different figures you get with the lance. You can equip them with a lance or a sword. It is entirely up to you how you do it. Let's have a look if I can find one of the sword guys. Yeah, here he is. Here's one of the sword chaps. So you get enough swords to equip the entire unit with swords, and you get enough lancers to equip the entire unit with lancers. But as I said, I used Dark Age spears from the Viking box set. I think it was a Viking box set. I just cut them off the figure and stuck them on these bases, these guys, and I think they look really good. Right, the lancers carry carbines. I just mentioned one last thing. The Polish lancers generally didn't use the lance in the Second World War. I think they only used it once, apparently. I don't know if that's even corroborated. I haven't looked into it, but I would assume they didn't, but I don't know. I'll get into that later. They're armed with a carbine, which is a short-barreled rifle, which, according to the rules, says that the carbine, when on horseback, is classed as a short-range weapon, so it fires like a pistol, and if the troops dismount and get on foot, then it fires as a rifle. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. It wouldn't be very easy to aim off of a horse, but then again, I have seen photographs of German cavalry standing on horses to fire. So I'm not sure how that's, whether or not that's propaganda or whether that's what they actually did. I don't know.
We'll never know.
Yeah, so we'll find out. I'm sure there'll be someone wrote about it somewhere. Yeah. So we go on to how actual cavalry work. Okay, cavalry in bolt action, in normal infantry in close combat, get one attack. Right? If you've got a weapon that can assault, just the same as in 40k, assault weapons give you a +1 attack. So if you've got troops armed with submachine guns then you get 2 attacks instead of 1 attack. Likewise, if you're carrying a sword, you get a +1 attack. A pistol and a sword, you get a +1 attack. Right? So cavalry gets 3 attacks in close combat. Okay? That's how it works in bolt action. Meaning you've got 3 times the amount of attacks, even though you're only armed technically with rifles and swords and stuff. You get 3 attacks, but if you charge with lance, you get an extra +1 attack. Now, as I said, they didn't really use lancers. However, I think this does kind of make sense because all Polish cavalry are classed as having lancers. And the Polish cavalry themselves did prove to be particularly good at combat. Unlike other armies that still use cavalry, the cavalry was merely used to get troops from A to B, which is what the Poles use them for. But they're also used to they were also used to fighting from the saddle. Polish troops were actually trained to fight from the saddle, so they would have had more training in combat on the back of a horse than normal armies. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Let's move this. Yeah. So whereas your German army and your Russian army would be trained to ride into battle and then dismount to fight, Polish troops were still trained to fight from the saddle with a sword. They still had that training in their combat doctrine because of the war they fought with Russia, where they defeated them with cavalry. Cavalry was very important to the Polish army and their combat doctrine. I have discussed the combat doctrine in the first video we did to this series, and I'm not going to go into too much detail now, but yeah, that's about it. Do you have any questions?
1.
Only 1?
Only
You
1.
used to be full of questions.
Well, there was another one that was about lancers.
Right, okay.
But it said that. Right. I might come up with more when I answer this one. How come the Polish used cavalry instead of armoured cars and tanks?
The Polish did use armoured cars and tanks. They didn't have a huge amount of tanks, but the tanks were equivalent to the Germans and the Russians. Poland is a big flat place. It's got rubbish terrain. It's not great to drive around on. If you've got anything with wheels, you have to stick to roads. If you go off-road, your armoured car sinks. We're talking about 1940s Poland, so it's before a lot of gentrification went onto the countryside. So you got a lot of marshland, a lot of boggy ground. Think of the Pripyat marshes, which are bordering on Poland. Were bordering on Poland at the time, and all that came over there. So there was a lot of waterlogged ground to walk over. It was not the nicest place to try and fight a war. So your tracked vehicles are all right, but even in bogs, your tracked vehicles can get bogged down, literally bogged down in bog. And so it was very useful to have horses, because horses can ride across bad ground. It's a very good way of getting around. You think when we go out in our car, we can't go off road, can we?
No.
No,
because the legs go around.
Because the car would fall apart if we tried to go off road, or it would just get stuck.
Or like pop tyres or something like that.
Yeah, if you're on a horse, you could go anywhere you wanted.
Can horses climb up like steep hills as well?
Yeah, horses can go anywhere. So they can even swim rivers.
They can.
Horses are just really, really versatile machines, creatures, things.
Yeah. How dare you!
So if you've got a unit of soldiers on a horse, they can go across the rough ground, across the bog and the peat and the marsh. Whereas foot infantry would get stuck, and armoured cars and they'd be too slow. Armoured cars can't go at all. And tracked vehicles like tanks, they would probably get bogged down. They need infantry to come along and pull them out, or even horses to pull them out. So even throughout the Second World War, most armies still relied on horses to carry supplies and stuff. The Polish army itself, which I forgot to mention in the last video, every infantry platoon in the every infantry section in the Polish army had its own horse and cart. to carry its supplies. That's
interesting.
That's just fact. So the Polish army on manoeuvres would be marching along with horses and carts. With a horse, you can carry 3 times the amount of weight you can carry on a man, for a man put on a backpack. So you can put all your stuff on the back of the horse and then ride it. So horses are very useful, even in modern warfare. They're still useful. So the Polish had armoured cars and the Polish had tanks, but the horse was still very important, especially due to their combat doctrine. Horses featured heavily in Polish combat doctrine for reasons I mentioned in the first video we did. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's it.
No question.
That's it then. That's the end of the video. I hope you've had a nice look at the figures. I've thoroughly enjoyed painting them up as well. They've been a real fun little project to do. If I can work out how this silly thing works. So I really enjoyed doing these cavalry. Warlord have done a brilliant job with them, and they look really cool. Didn't know what they were going to be like before they arrived. I'd seen a few pictures, but they fit together really well, and other than having to change the lancers, everything seems to work. It's quite good. And this is my first unit of Polish cavalry. I believe I'm going to be getting a second.
Private unit?
Yeah, I'm going to be getting a second unit, I think, later on. Because I'd like to use the Poles either as a cavalry army or an infantry army, but we'll see what happens. So that's it. Thank you very much.
No? I've got another question.
You got another question? Okay, go on then.
Right. Did the Polish put their cavalry in the front line or as reserves?
Polish cavalry were used for reconnaissance, so you could send them out forwards ahead of the army. Bear in mind, Poland was fighting a defensive war when the Second World War broke out, so they couldn't really use reconnaissance in that way, but the combat doctrine said that the Polish cavalry would be used as reconnaissance units. So you'd send individual cavalry units out to find the enemy and then report back. You could also ride forward really quickly over terrain, get to a crossroads or a house or whatever, and then dismount and defend it while the rest of the infantry march up with their tanks and armoured cars and anti-tank guns. So they acted, they could act in the way that tanks acted for, say, the German army. Whereas your tanks would go in first and exploit a gap, and then they'd go into the enemy rear and attack them. That's why the Germans had so many armoured cars. So they could drive behind the enemy rear and shoot people up and stuff. And then the infantry would have to catch up to the tanks to take the position you've just moved up to. So that's what these guys did. However, tanks are also very good as a reserve, because if you have units in reserve that can kill more or less anything you come up against, that's very useful. Now these guys can't exactly kill everything they can come up against, but they can certainly block any enemy breaking through. And the Germans never actually broke through the Polish lines in the way that they did against the French. The Poles actually retreated in front of the Germans rather than got broken. The Germans never made a huge hole in the Polish army to drive their tanks through. Whereas in France they did it again and again and again. They just kept doing it, and they did it to the British again and again. But it didn't work against the Poles, because the Poles had huge amounts of cavalry in reserve who could simply block gaps. Where things went wrong for the Poles was they had to change their combat doctrine, and so they decided that instead of fighting a defensive war all the way to the Romanian redoubt, which is what their plan was, they were afraid that Adolf Hitler would, after taking the Danzig corridor, say, war's over, we're not fighting anymore, which would leave Poland in a sticky position. So Poland realised they had to divide their army into fighting in the north and fighting in the south at the same time. And where it went wrong was when the Germans broke through to Warsaw and they managed to cut the two separate army groups in half. Meaning that Army Group North could not do anything to help Army Group South, and the Army Group South couldn't do anything to help Army Group North. And then you had poor guys defending Warsaw completely cut off on their own, because it was the dividing point between the two army groups. had it been one solid army, you wouldn't have been able to cut through it because the reserves would have been there. But because it was a joining point, it joined on Warsaw. I don't know why it joined on Warsaw. It's a silly place to do it, but they joined on Germany's main target. It meant that the two armies had no actual connectors to connect them together. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does actually.
Yeah. So when you deploy your soldiers in formation, your soldiers have the front line, the second line, and then a reserve line.
So
you don't have that if the two armies are joining together because you have a gap between them. There is a bit of an overlap, but it's a little bit confused. Which is what your bodyguard troops are for in the Russian army. That's primarily what the bodyguard troops were for. Not just defending the border, but to gel the armies together as they operated, because there was one continuous communication. You could communicate with all of them. It's complicated. I will actually maybe explain a bit more about that when we do the Russian army. But yeah, the Poles also had bodyguard troops as well, who were close to special force troops, a bit like the NKVD. And their job was to infiltrate the German border and sabotage bridges and assassinate people and do all that sort of stuff. They never. Yeah, that's 2,000 years earlier.
Yeah, but they're still using it.
Yeah, but the Sicarii weren't part of an army.
This is an example.
Yeah. Like the commando government. The Germans had commandos who did much the same. That they would infiltrate enemy areas, like the guys who dressed up as American soldiers during the Battle of the Bulge, which everyone will know about. They were commando soldiers.
No, I know about that.
How do you not know about that? You'd not done about that?
No.
Alright.
I learned about the Blitz.
Yeah, some German soldiers dressed up as American soldiers and directed traffic. So they went, the job behind American lines. And as the Germans were attacking, the American troops were coming to the front, ready to be deployed. Where do you need us? And these guys, dressed up as American traffic cops, stood there and said, "You're going the wrong way. You need to go down that road." And so all the American army were going all over the place, didn't have any control whatsoever. It got so bad, the Americans got so paranoid that the American military police actually put the commander of the American army effectively under house arrest because they wouldn't let anyone in to see it. So he couldn't control the army. There were guys trying to report to him, and the guards were saying, "You're not coming in, we don't know if you're German or not." And he'd be like, "I was here yesterday, you know I'm not German." "We were on the boat together coming over." He could be a spy. And caused all sorts of trouble. But the Poles had
friends since childhood.
Yeah. The Poles had trouble with that. One thing an interesting point. This is an interesting point. One of the local commanders, and I can't remember who it was, and I should look this up again. He decided to use black soldiers to direct traffic because there's one thing the Germans couldn't do. Couldn't impersonate black people. Yeah. And the Americans had segregated regiments, so black soldiers didn't serve with American soldiers, with white soldiers. It wasn't until Korea where America started mixing them up because they had lost so many casualties they didn't have a choice. And but during the Second World War the units were segregated, so you could just get the black soldiers and say direct traffic, and they were very good at it. So
they can't make them as a spy.
Well, they were good at it because you tended to be a better soldier. If you're black in a country that's inherently racist, well, it was then. It wasn't for a while, and it is again now. So if you've got a country which is inherently racist and won't do things, won't let you do things, the people who volunteer to go ahead are going to be better than the average. So if you've got a black pilot, he is going to be a better pilot than your average white pilot, because he's the best of the bunch. I had this explained to me by a traffic warden once. Seriously, I had this traffic warden, this female traffic warden, who explained to me that female traffic wardens are better than male traffic wardens. And explained the logic behind it, that only women who go forward.
Well, were you in traffic?
Yes, and the only traffic jam, and the only way to get forward. It was one of them N25 road. Cars don't move for 6 hours traffic jams. But
like America, New York. It's terrible in New York.
I've never been to New York. I can't say.
Terrible.
Yeah. So she was explaining that exact fact that if in a male-orientated job, if you have a woman in it, the chances are she's an exceptional woman above your average male person who would do that job. Because that's the sort of person who puts themselves forward to do that job. Why would a woman want to be a traffic cop? One of the worst jobs you could possibly have as a frontline service, having to deal with people in a bad mood with you for giving them a ticket. You need to be a big burly guy to do that. But if a woman wants to put herself forward to do that, she's going to be better at it than the guys are, because not only has she got something to prove, but she's going to be smarter than them because she had managed to pass the test better. Anyway, where the hell did we get on this from?
Well, I'm finished. Blabbering on about stuff.
Well, I should mention another thing about female soldiers. 40% of the Soviet army were women. 11 million women served in the Soviet army. A large number of women served in the Polish army, but only in reserve capacity, manning anti-aircraft guns and things like that. This whole idea of equality and stuff is rather silly, because only one country in the world several countries in the world have had true equality. In recent times, only one, and that was Russia in the Second World War. Women wanted equality in Russia, so they died in the millions with the rifle in their hands alongside the men. That's what you get if you want equality. Next question?
That's it.
Is that all you've got to say?
That's 4 questions.
Oh, that was actually quite good. I will mention a couple of other points. The Polish army had massive, because they had huge amounts of cavalry, they had massive reserves of hay, which greatly, they had little bunkers where they kept the hay, and this greatly helped the German army's advance, because the German army was horse-drawn, and as they advanced, they were able to, instead of waiting for the hay to be brought up to their own lines, they were able to eat the Polish hay and keep going. So that's how come the Germans managed to keep advancing. They weren't blitzkrieging, they were just by luck, they were capturing the Polish supplies as they were moved forward. Very useful for the Germans and very unfortunate for the Poles. Hay is very important to an army that rides on horseback. And the German army was mostly on horseback. So regardless of what you see on TV, the army that invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, only 3 divisions were fully mechanised. The rest of the 200 and odd divisions were all on horseback or on foot. Go figure. So that's it. That I believe is the end of the video, and these guys are awesome. So go buy some immediately. They're awesome. And notice the blue pendants. Right, over to you.
So, if you enjoyed this blabbering video, please leave a like and subscribe. And comment down below if you think this is one of our best videos we've done yet. That's everything from me.
And that's everything from him. Good day.
See ya.
I can't find the button. That's embarrassing.